Welcome everyone to another session of the Mantras for Peace Wisdom Gathering. Today we're here with Sarah Peyton. Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey. Sarah, if you're not yet familiar with your work, with her work, I can't wait for you to be. She's a neuroscientist, educator, a nonviolent communication trainer, among many other things, an author, teacher of all kinds of courses, and speaker. And what I love about your work and how it fits into the work that we're doing with Mantras for Peace is that you use this word resonance in your work all the time. And even your book is titled, I think it's Your Resonant Self, if I'm correct.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that just, that lights up all of the musical analogies that I love.
Me too.
So I'm just super grateful that you're willing to share your time with this project and share from your perspective how to use our voices as instruments of peace.
Oh, so beautiful. The voice is such a magical thing. And when I think about resonance and music, I often think about the vibrations that we can feel when music is playing through instruments like the cello, which I love the most. And
is that in your background?
Yeah, that's my cello hanging out back there behind me. Yeah.
Did you do that on purpose?
It lives there. It lives here with me. Yeah. And the way that a cello, if you're playing other music near the cello and you put your ear to the cello, you can hear it really softly vibrating, or you can sort of touch it and feel it vibrating. And I think that's what life does, like that life plays itself on our bodies as humans, and that we as humans can feel what's happening with each other because we have that capacity to vibrate together.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that really draws me in with curiosity to your work is that you're I feel like you're right in there with the crux of trauma, acknowledgement and awareness, and possibilities for newness, healing and hope.
Yeah.
So I wonder, for our audience here, is there one thing that you wish everyone knew about their brains and trauma in possibility? Like,
yes,
one thing.
Yes. The one thing that I would love that everybody knew is that the part of the brain that writes the trauma memory and that holds the trauma memory doesn't have a sense of time. It doesn't have any way to say, oh, a dog scared me when I was 3 years old. Instead, it's just saying all dogs are scary forever and we just need to stay away from them. And often we don't kind of detoxify ourselves of those ideas that came, those kind of global ideas that we make about the world based on our trauma, which often are about ourselves. Like we'll often believe that we're bad or wrong because that was the conclusion that we came to based on the bad things that happened to us. We're like, this couldn't be happening to me unless I really deserved it. I must be a terrible person. And then we just hold on to that because the part of the brain that's written in that thought isn't going, oh, that was what I thought when I was 3 years old. The part of the brain that's written in that thought is just like, this is the truth. And that's why I like to say it's not truth, it's trauma. And the more we understand that, the more compassion we have for ourselves, and the more we can go and get the resonant support that we need that allows ourselves to have a sense of accompaniment. Because as soon as humans are accompanied, as soon as there's somebody vibrating with us, then our brains start to do this wonderful emergent healing. We can't even predict what brains will do when they're healing, but all sorts of marvelous things happen as people heal. They start doing things they never thought they would do. They realize that they have always wanted to tango, and they go off to Buenos Aires and spend a month tangoing. Just all kinds of amazing things that happen for people as they heal that are completely just not at all in the beginning within their imagination.
Wow. When you talk about that, I feel all the lights firing. And I wonder, like, I guess maybe it's just me and kind of my obsession with transformation and teaching the steps of transformation to empower people, but like, how do we get from trauma to emergence?
Well, either with somebody else or learning on our own, we begin to bring our resonating self-witness, I call it, the part of the self that has a warm curiosity for what it was like to be a little one or an older one and receive this difficult moment. So we start to learn to what I call time travel, to time travel with resonance, where, for example, we have a memory. If you just choose something, you can tell me that you don't want to do this, but if you chose something from like last week, I could give you a sense of something that's still with you last week or the week before that, something that aggravated you or annoyed you.
Yeah, somebody didn't call me when they said they would call.
Yeah. So then in that moment, you and I take our resonating self-witnesses, and I bring a witness for you, and we step through time and space to the moment when you realized that this person who said they would call didn't call. And if there's anybody else in the room, we just freeze them, put them in golden floating bubbles, just so we don't have to worry about them. And we just focus on you, and we say maybe something like, it could be many different questions, but are you disappointed? Do you need acknowledgement of a micro heartbreak in this moment?
Yeah.
And there's a warm curiosity that we're bringing. And then you nodded and you said yes. And then we would go from there. Like, what's the next thing? You know, do you need acknowledgement that there's been somebody who hasn't called, and that there's been great losses that come from lack of connection? May or may not be true, but those are kinds of things that we ask, because we have a very warm and interested curiosity about how this moment really is for you, because the fact that you still remember it from last week or the week before that means that it's important to your amygdala. And its importance,
I love that it's important to my amygdala. It is. And for me, it was like trust and safety.
Yeah.
Which is amygdala
definitely
zone, right? Like primal trust.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, if somebody doesn't do what they say they're going to do, it's like the foundation of trust and safety is rattled.
Yeah. So, and then what happens is our body starts to relax. Did you notice your body relaxing at all with our little, just the first question that we asked, and you named?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's for me, that's the magic of finding the right note, like finding the right word that strikes the right note. Yeah. And then
exactly the vibrations. If the vibrations are similar enough, I love to use the idea of warmth and precision. If we bring an understanding of the traumatized self or the disappointed or heartbroken self in the worst moment, then we're bringing warmth, and if we bring warmth and precision, then the right vibratory quality happens, and in that, what happens is the amygdala begins to relax. And as it relaxes the hippocampus, starts to be able to claim that what was previously trauma and just turn it into life experience.
Yeah. Is it kind of like you're able to just compartmentalize it as a memory rather than like this living pain?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, then we start to, it goes into a larger arc of understanding of the self, like a context of the self in our life. And in that transformation into context, it stops being traumatic experience or traumatic memory, and it just becomes life experience.
Yeah, I mean, wow. Yeah. If there's only one thing to understand, I mean, that's just immensely useful.
It is.
Immensely useful.
It is. It's kind of magic.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I think yeah. So it sounds to me like you have this like an awe and wonder and respect for the brain.
Yes.
And because of your knowledge of the brain, you understand the capacities of the brain.
Yeah. I myself, I'm a neuroscience educator. I'm not a neuroscientist, but that gives me like a lot of scope to explore different people's work that is important to us as just sort of lay people getting out into the world and healing ourselves and offering healing connection to others. It really is transformative.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about it. It gives us understanding that the way that we are, the way that we respond to things, has a basis in our brain and how we've patterned according to our trauma. It just it takes the pressure off in a way.
Yeah.
You know, I really super grateful for those of you who are on the front lines doing that work and educating people about that, because it takes the shame or the stigma away from feeling broken.
Yes, it really does. And if our brokenness is like more a snag than a break, that we're snagged by the memory rather than broken by
the image comes to mind of a perpetual hiccup.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes I use the metaphor or the analogy of a river, a flowing river, and we're all kind of pieces of seagrass floating down the river, and there are snags that are, big old trees that are sticking up partly out of the river, and the seagrass gets stuck on it. That's one of the memories that snags us, and that then as we do the work, the piece of grass comes off around the edge of the snag and gets to continue on its way. That we run into trauma and get snagged by it, and that we get to change that.
Yeah.
And so then you had said, well, how do we get to emergence? So we had sort of gone in. You had said, yes, your body relaxed. Once the body relaxes all the way, then we say, body in the memory, would you like to come to present time with me? And if the body says yes, if the self in the memory says yes, this means that we've given it enough vibrational, accurate reflection and responsiveness, and that it can then move. And we have this experience then with the movement of actually reclaiming energy, life energy. Because if we have all these pieces of seagrass snagged around different snags in the river, then that's taking up a lot of our life energy that needs to be moving with the flow of time. And so the reclamation, I think, is a part of what you're asking about how do we get to emergence. It's like the energy comes back to us, energy that's been in a freeze state for so many years comes back to us, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, I can do something different. I can explore something different today. I can take action in a way that I didn't expect myself to take action.
Yeah. That's and so the key, as you said, is if I'm understanding correctly, is to meet the moment with, you said, warmth and precision.
Yeah.
And stay with that long enough till you feel the shift.
Yeah.
And then whoosh,
yes, a lot of times when people time travel, the first things they want to do with themselves is not ask themselves questions, but rather they want to reassure themselves. They want to say to themselves, everything's going to be all right. And they know from the standpoint of being a grown person or surviving 2 weeks later that everything is going to be all right. But if we just say everything's going to be all right, it doesn't have a question mark at the end of the sentence. And that doesn't open any room for dialogue with the self that lived through this. So we really want to be asking questions. And a question like, what do you need? What do you feel? Those are too broad. Those don't bring warmth and precision. They may bring warmth, but they don't bring precision at all. So it's a bit like we're inviting our ideas of what are people feeling, what are people longing for. We're taking those ideas and we're asking questions that would let the other person say yes or no. So and to possibly elaborate. So if we say, what are you feeling? Then we're disclosing that we like are bewildered, or that we don't have any idea. We don't even have a starting point. But if we say to ourselves, are you scared? Are you heartbroken? Is this hard?
So you bring a precise questioning or curiosity to it that gives a jumping off point for assessing whether that is actually tuned or not quite tuned to my experience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. This brings me to, so this sense of the snags and the impediments to the flow of emergence, brings me to something that I saw on your website just before, as I was, preparing for this talk today, where you are. There are two big subjects, but you're teaching courses and offering some materials on this. The epigenetic trauma from systems of oppression, colonialism, patriarchy, etc. And you were offering a preview of what's happening in the brain with those who are engaged in conspiracy theories and political extremism.
Yes.
And so I'm really curious. I'm curious if and how those intersect from your view, and what you could say to the audience that might help find resonance in those, seemingly overwhelming and insolvable issues.
Yeah, they are. They're such big things. And right now, with with so many people in the United States being, and globally, kind of going into what they call the rabbit hole of QAnon. It's quite an interesting time. And then there's, of course, all of the views about whether or not vaccination, is valid, and whether or not the idea that vaccination is not valid is a conspiracy theory. It's such a huge bundle of very present time questions. But the there are a couple of different standpoints that people have interest in about conspiracy theories. Sometimes people have been in or are in the conspiracy theory world, if we call QAnon a conspiracy theory, and I tend to on that particular front. Then if you've been in and you're sort of thinking about, is this where I want to be, or is this life-serving, or then there are those questions to ask. And then there are the folks who have loved ones who have kind of disappeared into conspiracy theory land. So many more right now than usual. It's a response. It's a very basic human response to uncertainty. It's a very basic human response to a sense of a world out of control.
You mean that the clinging to a conspiracy theory narrative is a basic human response to uncertainty?
Yes. And the more that we normalize it, the more we can sort of be calm and continue to be connected with ourselves if we're like experiencing the comfort of conspiracy theories, or with our partners or friends or relatives or parents, if they're kind of being pulled into that world. There's just more comfort, more love, more ease if we just know that the movement into conspiracy theory thinking is a movement that comes from like the need for acknowledgement of just how uncertain a world we live in right now. And
what's happening with the brain there?
What's happening with the brain?
Yeah.
The brain is finding comfort in a narrative that's big enough to explain the ills of the world. Humans don't really like the ills of the world to be explained by chaos. Humans find it much more comforting if the ills of the world are coming from a group of folks who are taking all the resources and making secret pacts to steal power. That's a much more satisfying narrative if someone doesn't like chaos. The idea that we have human brains that are that we have human brains that have two hemispheres, and that these hemispheres see the world in very different ways, and that we need to be able to mourn. It is so important, but so unsupported. So if a brain doesn't get to mourn, it moves very strongly into blame.
So to mourn, in this case, I'm just guessing, to mourn the loss of safety.
Yes, the loss of safety,
order, and
hope. Yeah, like if we take the global climate crisis, for example, it's a terrifying concept. And if we could change it so that the terrifying effects of global climate change are instead coming from huge space lasers that are starting forest fires, then we're going to it's just like so much more comforting than the idea that we're in the hands of ordinary humans who are just by virtue of our brains, we're not very gifted with being able to see into the future. Our brains don't really know how to see into the future. So for all of the folks who are taking resources or who are investing in fossil fuels or who are burning fossil fuels without thought for the environment and who are consoling themselves with the thought that there is no global climate change, it's just so comforting.
Mm. I have a question arises for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed, in my life and observing others is that oftentimes our first response to discomfort is not necessarily self-reflection and self-responsibility.
So true, isn't it?
And how do you explain? Is there a neuroscience
There is.
explanation for
There
that?
is. Our left hemisphere loves simplicity. Our left hemisphere loves order and structure, and it loves to have people it can blame. So if blaming the whole world of humans with two hemispheres who are not able to mourn is too big of a question, then it's much easier for the left hemisphere to blame a cabal or a group of people
Mm,
who are in charge. We are
mm,
not supported to mourn. We're not as supported to be able to step into our complex and whole grief. But when we do get to step into our complex and whole grief, the idea of the blame simply melts away. It's
mm,
quite extraordinary what we are capable of when we are in communities where we get to support each other and acknowledge the complexity and the
mm,
hugeness of our love and of our
mm.
tenderness and of our sorrow.
Yeah. That brings me back to the other hemisphere of my question, my big
Mm-hmm.
question, and I'm sorry for lobbing such a big one at you.
Sure.
But the the dis I think we're in a moment of real, like the lid is getting blown off about systemic racism and oppression that intersects with misogyny and the brutality of the colonial impulse. Um,
Yes.
and are you saying that if we were to allow ourselves the invitation to mourn fully the loss of whatever it is for us? I mean, I feel it as connection and belonging and togetherness, that I hope for, I wish for. And our mantra, Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu, is like, may all the beings and all the worlds, past, present, future, be happy, feel content, feel
Mm-hmm.
complete. Um, that is I think, for me, such a basic higher impulse of my humanity, the shared humanity. But yet we look around and we're so far away from that, in our practical expression. So are you saying that feeling the capacity to mourn the complexity of the loss is a key
It is.
part for reestablishing resonance?
Yes, it is.
Mm.
It absolutely is. And we need to be able to be with each other in it. And sometimes being with each other is worded, and sometimes being with each other is silent, and sometimes being with each other in it is musical. I have a friend in Ireland who says that song was the first psychotherapy. That, that being able to have sad songs and to sing sad songs and to cry together
Yeah.
created a resonant field where people were able to have complex and full lives.
Mm. That's very much reflected and extrapolated in the Indian tradition of music as I know it as well, with the different
Mm-hmm.
ragas and the all the almost the deification of the moods. Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, I know your time is come to a close, but I feel like um, just this is just the beginning of so many interesting, fascinating threads of hope and healing and peacemaking.
Mm,
Um, and I'm so grateful that we had a chance to connect in this
me
moment, and
too.
that you could share really what just feels like a tiny little glimpse of your bounty
Mm,
of wisdom and um, your toolkit with the Mantras for Peace community. Thank you so much, Sarah.
thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful to get to speak with you. Thank you for your work in the world. Mm.
Thank you so much. All right, so we'll put obviously we'll put all of Sarah's links and offerings in the show notes here, and you can connect with her sweet medicine as
Mm.
um, as you wish. So, all right, thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much.